Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are into the very last hour of Inspiration Summit today, and I could not be more excited by the speakers we have lined up. Our first is a fireside chat with someone who almost needs no introduction. Tobin Heath is the co-founder of Inc. and a trailblazer for women's equality in sports. Tobin's fight for equal pay and the recognition that she has extends far beyond the soccer field, making her, I think, a role model for women everywhere. Tobin won gold twice at the Olympics in 2008 Beijing Summer Olympics and 2012 London Summer Olympics. She's also a two-time World Cup champion. She was voted perhaps the USA's most skillful player by the US Soccer Federation and voted US Soccer Athlete of the Year in 2016. I also had the opportunity recently to hear Tobin speak, and I was blown away, and I'm so excited to welcome her to the stage at Inspiration Summit today. Hello,
Thanks,
hello. Great to see you.
Hi, everyone.
So I want to dive right in because I know we don't have a lot of time, and I think you have been such a powerful advocate for equal pay in sports, for equal recognition, and your voice has pushed this conversation forward in such a critical way. Could you talk a little bit about your own personal journey from realizing pay equity was a problem that not only that we should tackle, but that you wanted to help change?
Yeah, it's been a really fun and interesting journey. I've had the opportunity, privilege, and honor of playing for the U.S. Women's National Team for over a decade. I always say that kind of synonymous with all the winning is the progress we've been able to make off the field. And unfortunately for, so many women, we have to be more than just kind of what we are or what we do because it's not enough. And it was always a point of frustration for me because I knew deep in my soul, like I was just born to be a footballer. And with the resume that you just said, I think that should be enough. But honestly, it actually opened doors and expanded me in ways that I never knew possible. I think it's very kind of tied with being an athlete is being an entrepreneur, because as an athlete, you have your body and you have to do something with it, and you have like your person as a brand. So I think that's kind of like the first step of entrepreneurship that I ever took, was like me just being an athlete. And then obviously starting Inc. About 3 years ago or 4, before the 2019 World Cup, actually taking a step to form a company was pretty massive. Our company, Inc., was founded by 4 player founders, the 2 Megans, Megan Rapinoe, Megan Kleinberg, Kristen Press, and myself. And just building a company and taking up space, I always say being 4 women founders, being 4 queer women founder was massive for just to exist in a space where we just felt like it wasn't created for us. So that was a really powerful kind of step in this process. We had been fighting against so many structures, particularly against our federation with our equal pay lawsuit, that right before that World Cup, we wanted to create a structure that we could put all of our ethos and values into, that would be our vehicle for our fighting for something. And that was the birth and creation of our company, Inc.
I love that. And, I think when we think about the gender pay gap, it obviously affects probably most of the, over 1,000 women who are with us live today. The pay gap and the recognition gap shows up in so many different ways across so many different industries. How are you thinking about, what steps need to be taken to close the gender pay gap in athletics and in other industries?
Yeah, I think honestly, the pay gap is probably the most obvious one, but I think it's just kind of treatment. For us, it even was our facilities and the things that we were given to do our job, how they were so distinctly different from the men. So in every kind of space that we came into, we recognized that it wasn't built for us. And that was really challenging. I think when we first started, we almost had accepted the fact that we weren't paid equally, as if we didn't deserve to be paid equally. And that was kind of learning and unlearning at the same time was that no, like we absolutely do deserve to be paid equally. And if anything, we should be paid more based on the success that we've had. And most of our fight actually was for us to differentiate ourselves between the U.S. women's national team and the men's national team, to be able to go out and actually see our own value and be able to go out and fight for it, because we believed that it was there, but we needed the opportunity to be kind of untethered to go out and get it. And for so long, we had been going into these rooms and we had been fighting for equality. And we said, you know, like, please give us the investment. Like, we know the revenue's there. And for so long, people kept telling us, like, it's not there, it's not there. And we were like, well, just give us a chance. And we just realized that, you know, our value, it was there. It just wasn't being found in those rooms and those conversations with those people. And we believe, especially at Reinc, and I know with the U.S. Women's National Team as well, we believe in a world of abundance. We think it's kind of like bullshit, this idea that like there's only a certain amount of seats at the table, or there's only a certain size to the pie and everybody has to fight over it. I actually think that's the way that status quo culture, how it continues to exist, is through this idea of a scarcity mindset. And what we chose to believe is that there was abundance out there, and that we could not only create that abundance, but we could go out and grab it and achieve the kind of revenue that we knew we deserved, but we knew we also could create.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's such an important point to highlight that, yes, there's a pay gap, and that's a very obvious sign of that inequality, but it's so much deeper than that. I remember in the early days of founding the Muse and being an entrepreneur, everyone was talking about the funding gap for female entrepreneurs. And yes, that is really important, and it holds back a lot of creativity, a lot of entrepreneurs who could build incredible businesses if they had more support and resources, but it's not the only issue on the table. And I think having that holistic conversation is so important. And so with that, you know, you have transitioned to also being an entrepreneur. And so tell the audience, I'd love for people to hear a little bit more about Reinc, how it came about, what you're trying to achieve, and what you want people to know about it.
Yeah, kind of like what I alluded to before. So we were, you know, fighting against structures, and we wanted to kind of switch up that narrative. We actually love the tension of fighting against things and also fighting for things at the same time. We believe that that's where progress actually exists. Progress is never perfect, and it's really challenging, but I really believe it's found in that tension of fighting for and against at the same time. And that's where we were born. So it's interesting because we went into 2019 and we were defending our world championship because we had won in 2015. But at the same time, we were fighting for equal pay. We had sued our employees. So we had basically thrown all the chips on the table, and we said, you know what, like, it's like win big or like nothing. And at the time, it was a really complicated relationship. I mean, we were suing our employer, and we were also playing for them and trying to win a world championship. And, you know, people always say, like, particularly with athletes, like, oh, like the whole idea of just shut up and dribble. Like, if the U.S. women's national team had just shut up and dribbled, like, we would have never filed our pay equity lawsuit. We would have never achieved equal pay. We may not even have won that World Cup, because who knows? I think they were tied together in everything. I think this was the destiny of the U.S. women's national team. And forever, for whatever reason, I do believe in the vehicle and the power of sport to be able to transform and to create progress. I believe that firmly. And I think we had a unique opportunity in a country that has a lot of progress to be able to share that with the rest of the world. Global football, we touch every part of this planet. So for some reason, we were given this torch with the U.S. women's national team. And it was our job and our responsibility to carry that torch as far and as high as possible for the sake of women's equality. And I really preface this with the biggest kind of catalyst to this thing is, you know, we go into the World Cup final and we win the World Cup. And in a moment where you think the whole stadium would be chanting USA, the whole stadium is chanting equal pay. And this is a global movement. If there's anything that every single person felt in that moment and could relate to, and every woman can relate to across the world, is being treated and paid unequally. That's the thing that we have a shared experience. And in that moment, it was powerful. And I think it's a catalyst for everything that we're doing in reimagining the world and reimagining the status quo with our company, is that we saw in that moment that women's sports isn't just about sports, and it's not just about women. It's about progress. It's about equity, equality, inclusion. And we have a real opportunity to use it as a vehicle to I believe, change the world. And I think, looking forward to kind of what is next, what are those next World Cups? I think it is in creating companies and structures that look and feel more like us. And I'm happy that I get the opportunity to kind of lead that and build one of those structures.
Yeah. And it's, I think, so powerful for everyone, right? For women and men in all stages of their career, for kids who look up to you all and don't just see the stardom on the field and as an athlete, but also this fight for something that is even bigger than yourself and is so important to all of us. And I love that. And I think that the next thing I would ask is just that, there's so many people who have tuned in today to Inspiration Summit and have talked in the chat about their own struggles or attempts to break barriers in their chosen fields, to make an impact in their community, to advocate for, their communities, their families, themselves, others, to make the world a little bit of a more equitable, a more inclusive place. Do you have advice? What would you say to the individuals who, look at you and say, I'm so inspired by what you've done. How can I take a piece of that back in my own life?
Yeah, I think this summit is actually one of the great examples of it. I was fortunate enough that I played for a team. So what happened was, through the process of, you put 11 women on the field, and those 11 women had to go out and figure out a way to win a football match. There was no man on the field to kind of say oh, let me do it for you. We did it ourselves. And I think that's powerful. I believe in the power of community. I believe in the power that you don't have to fight battles alone. I think, like I said, in that moment when everybody was chanting equal pay, the act of gathering was so powerful. That stadium chanting that was so powerful. And I think we've all had shared experiences to the point of being paid unequal. We have that shared experience. And I think that if we try to look at our individual battle as an individual battle and not as a collective battle, I think we fail. I think if we look at it collectively, I think we really have a chance of succeeding. I was speaking to another athlete in another sport recently, and I was kind of hey, what's going on in your sport? How can I help? And it was interesting because, in all these kind of women's sports pockets, because I believe women's sports currently is fragmented. It's not accessible. I mean, if you try to go watch it, it's everywhere and nowhere at the same time, which is really frustrating for fans. I think you lose a massive audience because of that. And so part of this was I said, hey, what's going on? And she started telling me about the battles that she was going through. And I was like, man, that sounds like something we did 5 years ago, that we went through 5 years ago. And I was frustrated in that moment because I was by keeping us fragmented and keeping our battles kind of small and to each industry and to each person's situation, it really diminishes the power that we have as a collective. And I think moments like this, when you can realize that every single woman, every single field has a shared experience, it might look different, it might feel different, but we all have a shared experience, and that our voices coming together are really, really powerful. That's when we start this conversation from another perspective. And I remember in our pay equity lawsuit, there's one critical moment where, for so long we had gone into these rooms that, it seemed like they would be smarter than us, right? They seemed like the people, they were, talking all this bullshit, trying to make it so that we couldn't understand what they were saying, yada, 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 the economics or blah, blah, blah. And honestly, through this process, we were just okay, we're sick of going into these rooms to be told that we have no value. We believe in our value. We see our value every single day. we're done with this room. And in one moment, a collective group of us, instead of just continuing to hear that and continuing to accept it, in one moment, that collective group, we stood out and we walked out of the room. And that act was so powerful. And it's one that for the people that were in the room, it will sit with me for the rest of my life, because it was the first time we stood up together as a collective and we said, no, we're done with this. And that started a massive, massive moment of a power shift.
Yeah, I love that. It's claiming your value and owning it. All right. Well, I could talk to you for the rest of the afternoon, but since we're at the very end of time, my very last question is just, if someone is fired up by this conversation and they want to learn more, they want to follow you, they want to follow Re-Inc., where should people go?
Yeah, I think like supporting women's sports is a big one. I think that the supporting women's sports, demanding more for the athletes. You can find us at rewebsite.com. We use, our collections, our storytelling to really uplift marginalized voices and stories. That's part of like this idea. We have a platform. We want to give the platform to other people. We want to amplify conversations like this over and over again. Going into this big thing called the World Cup this summer. We're starting a media division that's going to change the way women are seen and experienced in sports, which is really exciting and kind of tackling a whole nother issue that we've seen and experienced through our careers. And we're ready to start carving out a space for what women's sports culture should look and feel like by the people that have done it themselves. So big things to come. But I'm just really inspired by conversations like this that are being had with so many women that are in the workplace that are trying to create change. I think reimagining the world is, one step, but it's also like one step with everyone.
Yeah. And I love what you said. If we band together, we're a lot harder to ignore.
We're a team.
Thank you so much, Tobin.
Thank you.
Thank you. To everyone listening, we will be back in just about 2 minutes with our next speakers. Back to you shortly.